And officially, we are now live with Richard Browning all the way in the UK. And let me see if I've got this right, because I've heard different accounts. Some people say that you are the real Ironman. Some people call you the British Ironman. I'm sure to your wife, you're just the guy that packs the rubbish and throws the bin out. What is your official title?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I suppose the title I find myself using is founder and chief test pilot from Gravity. So Gravity is the company that we formed around what we built. And yeah, I don't like CEO, so I describe myself, as I say, as really a chief test pilot, because it was really me that spent all that time falling over repeatedly in that farmyard in the UK, going through the learning journey of seeing if we could make this work. So that's more of my title I would describe. The Ironman thing, we didn't build this to build an Ironman suit. I'm delighted that a lot of people think it looks like that, and actually increasingly we've ended up going down the route of using that almost like as I suppose as a demonstration of capability we strive to achieve, and we're getting quite a long way down that road.
It doesn't hurt the image to associate. So
no, not at all.
Before we even get onto the whole suit and how you all got there, I always like to look at the origin story, and every superhero, now that you are associated with one, has an origin story. You were not a rocket man 5-10 years ago. So where did this all come about?
Yeah, I had a job with one of the oil majors in London, and I used to be an oil trader. So that really means buying and selling ships with, in my case, gasoline or petrochemicals on. That was my background. But I also spent 6 years in the British Royal Marines Reserve as well, alongside my day job. I set up a startup some years ago as well. I guess I like a challenge, and I've had enough kind of lucky breaks in my life that when I've set myself a challenge, most of the time, to be clear, I've failed at them. That's the nature of life. But I've done enough where I've managed to achieve what I was aiming to do. And that feeling you get, whether it's getting off the sofa and doing a 5K park run or not, or building a jet engine suit, I've had enough experiences, luckily, where it's worked out, and it's just addictive to go and set yourself that kind of challenge and just imagine what it's going to be like if you get there. And this is, I suppose, just a big example of that. I didn't set out to try and build an Ironman suit or to go and build a flying system. I just started to hatch this idea that maybe humans could fly in a slightly different way. And I just thought it'd be cool to see if we could achieve it.
Okay. Now, I'm thinking you obviously, maybe you're a bit bored at work, because this kind of thing doesn't just, you don't just get an idea, I'm going to build an Ironman suit. I mean, there must have been something going on in your head, maybe some sort of connection to flight that would have put these ideas into your head.
So my whole family background, my father was an aeronautical engineer. His father was a pilot. My other grandfather used to run the UK's main helicopter manufacturing company, but it was all before I was really very old at all. Mm-hmm. But I must have inherited some of that, I suppose, some of that spirit. Now, I'd say really, though, the origin, apart from having I suppose, an enthusiasm for an interesting challenge, the origin was probably my time in the Royal Marines and the time I used to do ultramarathon running and things like that. I suppose I developed a very keen enthusiasm for human capability. If you really take a step back for a moment and think what human beings is, if you think of as human as a robot, how many different jobs can that robot do? Yeah, you feed that robot a chocolate bar, and can go and run for 5 miles, right? Easily. Or maybe you can go fly an airplane, or be a nurse, or a doctor, or write a story, or go and paint a house. I mean, it's mind-boggling what the human machine can go and point itself at and achieve. So when it came to flight, I just had this idea, as ludicrous as it sounded, that if you got a human being and just added the right small amount of technology to that human mind and body, and tried to fly in that way, how possible would that be? Because if you think about it, most things that fly are a big object that a human being sits in and then pilots, yeah? So I had this idea, let's use the mind as the balancing machine, and let's use the body, the arms, maybe the legs as the flight structure. Because all this training I was doing for the Marines, I got pretty fit and strong, and I thought, well, I can hold my own body weight in all sorts of different positions. Instead of leaning on the floor, why can't I lean on an aerofoil or maybe some form of propulsion, and I can still hold myself? So let's go and explore it. And then, as per the TED Talk clips, you can see all the experiments we went through. And I'd also say we're very lucky that this all came about around the same time as micro jet engines, little gas turbines, little engines just the same as you get on a 747, but tiny. I was very lucky that around the last 5 years or so, the sophistication of those has gone crazy. So they've got such powerful electronics in them now that you can pretty much press start and within a minute they're ready to go. That was impossible 10 years ago. It would be like a science project to try and get that gas turbine up to temperature and all the rest of it. So that's another big helpful factor that's helped.
Would you say that the timing was serendipitous? That, I mean, if you had tried to do all of this maybe 5 or 6 years earlier, it might not have happened.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to have the humility to recognize that most major technology breakthroughs happen when several things all happen at the same time. So the iPad, for instance, came about because flat screen technology, touch screen, batteries and processors were all about the right size and form factor. And actually, I'm not going to belittle the development of the iPad, but there was an element of just sticking together lots of other cool things that happened to be ready to produce something super spectacular. And I would accept we've done somewhat the same thing. It's been the marriage of lots of components that just had their time.
But it's about having the vision to know which components to put together. And also the need. I mean, you obviously deciding you wanted to get some sort of device that could lift you off the ground, and then you start doing research, and then you start discovering all the new things. So maybe you were the driving force, and maybe the fact that you had this need, people started to develop things towards that need. Or do you think they were just developing it anyway?
No, not really. No, because we kept this secret. This looked ludicrous until we. Well, I don't know if we'll have to send the link round or something of that. It's a very short TED talk. There's loads of stuff online about it.
I've seen it.
Yeah, there's me standing in various bits of the British countryside with an engine attached to various bits of my body. That looked utterly ludicrous until we did the very first flight, because I didn't know if this was going to work. And it did look insane having one engine on your arm and feeling the thrust and thinking you could ever fly. No, we kept this entirely secret, so no one else developed anything in support of this. We were simply taking available technology and modifying it and experimenting. And I think I should kind of pause on that point, that a key catalyst to this entire journey has been the ethos of having an idea, even if it sounds slightly crazy. And I have to say, as an adult, you get rubbish at this. Kids are much better at doing this, at having what might be a crazy idea, but every breakthrough started as a crazy idea. Have that idea and then quickly assess what can you do, not like in a month's time. Big companies are useless at this. I used to be in one. What can you do this afternoon to test that idea out? And for me, that was getting an aluminium tube I already had knocking around my garage and shoving my arm in it and thinking, that could be an arm mount, right? I could test what it would be like to feel a jet engine on that arm, because there's about 6 different assumptions that any normal, aeronautical engineer would have easily listed for you as to why this would never work. And one of them would be you'd never be able to withstand the thrust. Another one is that with the middle of the engine spinning at 120,000 times a minute, that's like about 20 times faster than a normal car engine. That would kind of somehow rip your arm out of its socket, or as you move it, it would the centrifugal force, the gyroscopic effect would actually fight you, like holding a bicycle wheel when you spin it and it fights you.
And it would try right itself, though.
Right, and then there's about 3 or 4 other regions. You can't carry enough fuel. It'll be too hot. It'll be too dangerous. It'll just never be possible. Well, it turns out that by getting that aluminium tube, and it did take me a couple more days to bolt one of these test engines onto it, and I stood in that lane and tried it, and all of those assumptions dropped away. By testing, it turned out that it was rubbish. All of those assumptions were just not real at all. So I would say there are 3 rules I really want to make sure I'm clear on here. There's 3 rules that we've applied throughout this entire journey, and we never stop applying them. Go and test your hypothesis, go and test your ideas. But the 3 rules are, if failure occurs, which I spent more time failing than I spent succeeding, absolutely, for the first year of doing this, if that failure could hurt you, anybody else, damage your reputation, in other words, upset people around you, or cost you so much money that you can't continue the journey, then don't do it. As long as I squared away those 3 rules, then we just got on and tested and learned so fast that it really only took us about 8 months to do that very first flight.
And you certainly had your fair share of falls. I mean, I watched the video and I mean, maybe you didn't even show the good ones. But I mean, I was thinking, you've got 2 rocket thrusters on your arms.
Jet engines, not rockets. That would be worse.
We're going to talk about that, the difference between rockets and jet engines. So you've got 2 jet engines, and I've seen photographs. There is an immense amount of heat. Well, it looks like it's heat that's being generated. Maybe it's just the gasoline that's coming out. Does
Not
that
gasoline
mean you
either.
set your
So
shoes
these are all
on fire?
These are all these assumptions.
Tell me about these assumptions that I'm getting wrong.
Yeah. So for start, they're jet engines. It's not a firework rocket. That would be really crazy, because you like that and you can't really turn it off, and it's super hot and they can blow up. These are jet engines. They run off essentially diesel fuel. I mean, it's diesel or jet fuel, but if you think of it like diesel, it's extremely hard to ignite. And even if it does ignite, it doesn't blow up. It doesn't form a big vapor cloud and a big fireball. It's diesel. It's quite boring stuff, frankly. And the heat, right? So there's a really interesting thing here. If you get a hairdryer and you hold it near your head, it kind of burns your head, yeah? If you hold it about 2 foot away from your head, it's really not very hot at all. And it's down to this thing called specific heat capacity of air. Air doesn't hold much energy at all compared to water, for instance, yeah? And the reality of actually having these engines on, they blow hot air, and within several feet, the temperature absolutely collapses. So I used to fly with these synthetic, man-made fiber boots on my legs. I've even got them back there.
I'm just having a look at a photograph here. I don't know if you guys can see that. Are those the boots?
No, that's a later variant. No, there's an older. I can even go and grab the boots in a minute if you like. They are synthetic, and you would think if there was any heat around, they would melt instantly. And yet they were only about 2 foot from my engines, and they never melted at all. And it's down to this weird characteristic of air. It does not hold the heat at all. So I've even flown within 6 feet of people, and yeah, it's not pleasant, but it's not dangerous. So it turns out it's not a problem.
See, now we're learning a lot here.
It doesn't carry the heat. It's just, you'd think on a piece of paper this would be a really good reason never to do this, but it turns out it's rubbish.
But now, on that note, Mr. McNulty, I know you guys are going to leave quite soon. Do you have any students that want to ask any questions?
Yes, we do. Could I come on up?
Come on up.
Okay, we'll ask him to introduce himself, and he's got a question for you. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Vinny Sidlick. I go to Holland Middle School, and my question is: did you ever get hurt while test flying one of your jetpack thing?
Yeah. Yeah, did I ever get hurt? Yeah, jet suit. We call it a jet suit because you're kind of wearing it, right, rather than sticking on your back. I mean, it's all around you. Yeah, I've never, not seriously hurt myself. Like I said, with those rules, if you're doing a test and an experiment, and failing that experiment could mean that you do yourself permanent damage, that's stupid, right? Because you can't get back up and try again, yeah? We've had to try this hundreds of times, and so every single time I've got to be able to get back up again. But it doesn't mean I haven't fallen over. So I've fallen over probably 8 or 9 times. There's a little show reel. I could even try and work out a way of showing it on here, but you find it quite fun. I might find it fun. I've fallen over in lots of different ways, from lots of different heights onto lots of different surfaces, and been fine. And it's because we've been sensible about protecting ourselves and also about what things we fly over. But yeah, about 8 or 9 times. Yeah.
Okay.
You have to take a little bit of risk to do anything new, but it has to be a managed risk.
Mr. McDonald, you got another one? Because you guys are leaving in about a few minutes.
Yes.
So fire away.
Come on up. Okay, you had a question. Come on up.
I wasn't next, but I was last.
Okay. There you go. Here he is.
My name's Hamza. I'm from Holland Middle School, and I wanted to ask, how much does it cost to build one machine?
That's the question. So the one, I'm going to try and point, there we go, above my finger there's one lurking in the background there. That one, I'm going to tell you how much we sold it for. It's not mine anymore because we sold it 3 weeks ago. That was $440,000 for that 1,000 horsepower jet engine suit there. It's a particularly nice one, I will admit that. How much does it cost to build? Well, that would be slightly secret. So it's a bit like asking Lamborghini how much it costs to build one of their $200,000 cars. It doesn't cost $200,000 to build it, that's for sure. We are charging decent amounts of money for something that no one else can supply, and there's only 3 or 4 people in the world that own one of these outside of us. So when you're building a company from scratch, and I think Elon Musk did the same with Tesla when he sold the very first really high-end Teslas, he said, look, I'm going to charge a real ton of money for these because you're going to be an exclusive group of people that have got something no one else have got. So we kind of apply the same thing. So It doesn't cost $440,000 to make, but we are also going to make them cheaper and cheaper as we go. But yeah, I'm going to keep secret exactly what it costs us to make them.
But I mean, if you think about it, this has become your business. I mean, you now run a very successful.
Yeah.
Oh, they've got 2 more questions. Yes, you could squeeze in 2 more questions. Mr.
Yeah,
McNulty, sure.
Oh, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. You know, we're on a tight schedule here. It's a middle school.
Hi, my name's Allie. How many years did it take you to get to this point in the invention?
Well, the line breaks up a bit.
How many years did it take you to get to this point? And I mean, this is going to fascinate them.
Yeah, so if you think back to March 2016, so like Easter time 2016, that's when I started and there's a little film clip of me standing in an English country lane with one engine on my arm, blowing it around at a hedge. And that was the starting point. And then by November that year, so what, like 7, 8 months, whatever, I had done the first flight, and that had an engine on each leg and 2 on each arm. It was pretty crude, but it flew for about 6 seconds, and it was a big moment for us. Then through that next winter, we then refined it and launched the company only in April 2017. So we've only been out in the public eye in, you know, around the world showing people what we do for 18 months. And in that time, I've done 62 flight events in 20 countries with this. So it's been a super rapid journey. I look older now than I did 2 years ago by a lot. But it's just too fun. So no, it's not taken very long at all to develop it. We went really quickly because we just applied that principle I was describing. We just carried on working out constantly how we could experiment with stuff. I'll tell you a secret, that the trigger on my engines, I've got one here, that's one of the 3D printed arm assemblies. You might recognize that from the YouTube stuff. The throttle trigger there, that little red trigger, we could have custom commissioned that to be built by some fancy company and spent 6 months waiting for it and $100,000. Not so much. We just bought one on eBay. I bought an electric hammer drill on eBay and ripped it out of the drill. So that's a second-hand hammer drill trigger, and it meant we could go and test it like a day later rather than wait and spend lots of money. So we applied that principle, and that's why we moved so quickly.
Unbelievable. And I mean, I know that would surprise you because a lot of people think that this has been a few years in development, but literally, I mean, that's just
I'm too impatient.
Like this. Wow.
Is there another question there? No?
Yeah, well,
yes. Hi.
So my name is Aaron Valeriano. I go to Holland Middle School. Did anyone ever like put you down and say that you couldn't do it?
Yeah, well, I kind of avoided that by then keeping it secret. So there was only really about 4 or 5 of us that would go to this little farm test site that was hidden away. No one could see it. If I'd been tempted to put this on YouTube and like tweet around it and whatever, I would have got an army of people telling me I was wasting my time and how stupid it looked and whatever. That's just how humans are, right? I doubted myself quite a lot while I was doing this. I was doing this alongside a day job, and there were days when I just, you know, I'd be working all weekend on it, dragging my kids off to the farm test site, and I'd never achieve anything. We just have stuff break all the time, and I'd seriously wonder whether I was just wasting my time doing this. It's tough, right? There's no magic rule, because a lot of the time you go down a road of exploring something brand new, and actually maybe it is a waste of time. Maybe it's never going to work, but this one did work. And, you know, we just persevered and didn't give up. It isn't easy, though. Often I've done more things in my life where I should have given up earlier than things like this where I had to persevere. It's difficult. You've got to keep testing yourself and thinking, am I really taking the right approach here? And every now and then back up and relook at what you're doing. You know, we for instance, thought that the way to fly this would be having a throttle trigger for like each engine and flying it on the throttles. And we spent a lot of time trying that, and it just didn't work. And we had to wait, you know, scrap a whole load of work on that and back right up again and go, hang on a minute. I think we should fly this by pointing them in different directions, keep them all at one power level and fly it with what we describe now as vectors rather than with throttle triggers. So it's difficult. It's very tricky. Any new invention is considered ridiculous until it works and then potentially changes the world.
Sure. Great question. I had the privilege of hosting Yves Rossy in Cape Town.
I know Yves,
and Yves is an absolute legend. He was saying that, you know, in his situation, his body was the fuselage. So effectively, is that the same sort of thing for you?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, the airframe, the structure is my body. I mean, I've got 2 engines on each arm. I've got now one just round my waist, around my back. Yeah, and they're entirely connected to only me. You know, yeah, it's a good way of putting it. I would describe, yeah, in fact, maybe even more so than Yves, because I mean, Yves's engines are attached to his wing, and then he's attached to his wing. My engines are attached to me. I mean, you know, and my other pilots, when we're flying, we are really a very intimate amalgamation of body and machine. Yeah.
Like the real Ironman. Now, Ellen, maybe your students have got some questions. Are there any questions on your side? Oh, I see a hand up there.
All right, come on over. Okay.
Hi, my name is Nishi. I'm in Glenbrook Elementary. And how did you get this idea?
Yeah, it's funny. I definitely didn't just wake up one day and sort of bang my head and think, God, I've got to build a flying thing, or I've got to build an Ironman suit. It was really this idea about could I use my head and my arms really and my body from all the training I'd done with the UK military. I thought, could I use that to fly in a way that was largely considered to be impossible? It's quite exciting when you take on a challenge that people think is impossible, or maybe you think is impossible, and yet you can just about see a pathway to going and exploring it and maybe achieving it. It was really the challenge of it. That was what really drove me. I kind of dreamed a little bit of how cool it might be if we could achieve it. And yeah, and we got there.
That was a great question. Let's get some more questions from Ellen's group.
Okay. My name is Evan, and I'm from Glenbrook Elementary. How does it feel when flying?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And lots of interviewers ask me this all over the world. So it's really hard to describe it. But have you ever had a dream that you're flying? Have you ever had that dream?
Yeah.
Yes.
So in that dream, you can just lift off the ground and float around, and wherever you think you want to go, you can go there. Yeah, as fast as you like, or as slow as you like, or stop, or move, or go back. Honestly, it's like that. It is a lot more noisy than your dream, but it is genuinely that degree of freedom. I mean, I'm almost tempted to. I'm gonna try and do this. Right, this was yesterday. I'm gonna try and show you guys a film from yesterday, above the lake where we set the world record for the fastest speed. I'm going to show you a little film clip.
Does that happen often? That I mean, you've got a record and then all of a sudden you go test it and you go break the record just when you...
Yeah, that Bournemouth flight. Yeah. I mean, I set the world record at 51 kilometers an hour and my colleague set 74 and I did 69. Yeah, I know. No one's up my wall over there is the world record thing. We haven't really told the Guinness people yet that we just added 50%. But look, watch this, right? You might like this. When I say about the dream of flight, I'm going to try, and this is going to be more difficult than flying, trying to get this to work in a good way.
We can see it. We can see it. That's perfect.
See on there, right? This is the guy with a green helmet on a jet ski. And if I can press play.
Yep, you got it. It's working.
Is it moving? No. Hang on, here we go. I told you this would be tricky. There we go. Look at that. Look, that's what he saw from his jet ski. Look at that, right? So I'm just floating around like that, like I'm on a wire. Now I just peeled away. He then spins this super fast jet ski round. I'll leave it playing out. No one's seen this yet, by the way. We haven't even put this online yet. This was literally yesterday. Wow. See, I've gone quite small there because I've gone hammering off in a long distance away. In a minute,
now you're catching up to him?
Watch this. Look, way straight over the top of it. Yeah, so when I say about that dream of flying, it is like that. You don't have any conscious thought about what you're doing with your arms. Do you ride a bike?
Yes.
So when you ride a bike and you want to steer like down a road that way, do you really have a big thought about, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to lean, I'm going to steer. You don't think that, do you? You just think I'm going to ride down that road. It's just like that, except I can go up too. I just think where I want to go, and weirdly, it just happens. Your mind and your body just work together. It's crazy. It's really hard to describe. It's a real pleasure, especially over water, because then if I get something that breaks, I just go in the water rather than fall over. That's a great question.
Those are great questions. I sort of quickly throw in one or two questions. We had a school in the US that they didn't want the kids' names mentioned, but I was going to read out one or two of the questions. The one is, how far does the suit fly, and what is the greatest distance you've ever flown?
Yeah, so it's more about how long the suit can kind of run for on decent power. because in that time you can go, well, now it turns out you can go 50 miles an hour, which is about 74 kilometers an hour. So if you turned on the suit, went into the hover and then dashed at 50 miles an hour, then you can work out yourself how long you could go. If I tell you that the one that I was flying yesterday with those jet skis, that one can take 20 liters, which is what, 5 gallons or something like that, 4 or 5 gallons. The problem with hovering without wings is that it uses up absolutely masses of fuel. It burns nearly a gallon or nearly 4 liters a minute. So yeah, it's 1,000 horsepower. It's more than a Formula One car. I mean, that suit, again, I'm going to try and point my finger at. It's fun. That suit is more powerful than a Formula One car, and there's 2 more, one either side of it. So just like the Harrier aircraft or a helicopter or the F-35 fighter, any of those things in the hover burns huge amounts of fuel because it's a very energy hungry activity. As soon as you start traveling with wings, you can generate more lift and it's much more efficient. So we are working on wings as one of the things we're developing, but until then it burns all this fuel. So in that time I can probably hover for about 4 minutes, or I could fly along at 50 miles an hour for 4 minutes. It makes no difference to me. We've got another one that can carry twice that amount of fuel, but we don't use it very much because it's carrying, if for liters, it's carrying 40 liters. Or about 10 gallons of fuel, which is huge. Yeah.
And you've obviously got a heads-up unit that tells you how much fuel you've got left and that type of thing?
Yeah, it's a really good, apart from being very cool, it's a really good thing to have a little lens inside my helmet that shows me my fuel and engine data. So as I'm flying along, it's like a proper Ironman heads-up display. It actually tells me all the fuel data. And I've got one of the helmets. This used to be one of the helmets I used to fly with. It looks pretty evil. Look at that.
Wow, that is awesome.
It's that's like a $15,000 augmented reality helmet all in its own. To be honest, it's way over spec for what I need. But I used to fly with that. In some of the old YouTube clips, you'd see me fly with that. We've got a much more simple, lightweight, more appropriate version at the moment now, which I was flying with yesterday, for instance. Because yes, it's very important I keep an eye on the fuel. It's a rubbish reason to crash.
Wait a second. If you've got an augmented reality helmet, does that mean you are filming through the helmet, so we get first-person view, plus we get to see the augmented stuff, and then that becomes available online for us to use with virtual reality goggles, so we can see exactly what you're seeing when you're flying?
Yes, in summary. Now, what? There's a way of slightly cheating, which is that if you put a GoPro on your head, you can click a few buttons on it and it'll pull up the GPS data and show you speed and distance and whatever, and then it looks like that you've got that heads-up display view. But better than that, again, I don't know how holding an iPhone in front of a screen really works.
No, it's working. It's working.
It's kind of low tech, but I want to see if I can share something that's pretty cool. There's a flight here which was what we shot over Malibu Beach in the US, in California, at sunset. This was using a Fusion 360 camera. And
now that's exciting. When you start bringing 360 into it, then you get people to be a part of your journey.
Yeah, so when we do the race series, when we have all these guys and girls racing 1,000 horsepower jet suits around a water course, we're going to have live broadcasts of heads-up display properly. So you can see all the data and you can actually look around. You can put a headset on and look around. But to get somewhere close to that, let's see if this is going to work.
This is going to be awesome.
It would look better if we sort of did a better broadcast. But I don't know if that's going to work. So
no, I can see what you're seeing. Yep.
So I'm going to try and steer it.
So you're using the 360 so we can actually see the different angle.
There you go. Look at that.
Wow.
That's me. My head isn't quite that big. But,
it just basically looks like it's a head with the rocket thrusters.
Yeah, and then I can't really steer it very well. Anyway, I mean, look at skimming over the waves there. Yeah, it's pretty cool. That's more like what it feels like when you're actually flying. And that was, like I say, sunset, Malibu Beach, kite surfers. Look at that.
Oh,
pretty cool.
Wow, that is insane.
Yeah, it is pretty magic.
Oh boy.
So yeah, we'll be doing that with the race series. We want people to feel like they're actually live on board flying.
All right, I'm going to switch over to Ellen's class. I see some more students want to ask some questions.
What is the most amount of jet engines that you used in one test flight?
Well, the old suit I first flew used to have 2 engines on each arm. So I'm going to wave this up again, like 2 on each arm. My arm was in here and an engine here and an engine here. And so I had that on each arm. and then I'd have 2 more engines on my back, around my waist. So that was 6 little engines. We now fly with 5 because the 2 little ones on my back have turned into 1 big one. But I could also answer your question in a different way, which is how many engines have we broken in one testing session? And that's probably more like an entire suit's worth. I mean, when you crash into the water, you write all the engines off. They all have to be fixed. So that's probably the other answer to the question. I've destroyed 5 jet engines in one go, falling in water before.
And these are not cheap, I assume.
No, not really. Luckily to repair them, it's not too bad. But I think we worked out if I throw a suit in the water, and I did it twice at Bournemouth at the air show, then it's about $8,000 to get the suit back up again, which isn't bad for something that we're selling for 440. So it's a lot cheaper than smashing up Formula One cars.
So now our friends at NASA have just broken a record for the fastest deployment of a parachute for the new Mars 2020 rover, and something like, I think it was less than 4 seconds to get the full parachute out. If you were flying at a certain height and all of a sudden things did not go so well, do you have those kind of safety features built in?
No, the problem with a parachute is that you, I mean, I was about to be really impressed. I thought you were going to tell me 4 milliseconds or something. Because
maybe it was 4 milliseconds. I'll have a look.
I was going to say 4 seconds. It depends, right? It depends a lot. If you're high enough or you're traveling fast enough, then and you deploy a parachute, it can open out very quickly and you can swing underneath it, and that can really help. The problem we've got is, how do you get high enough where a parachute can be useful? Because if it's, say, 300 feet, what happens if you have a failure at 200 feet? It's like you're still going to be in a real trouble, and the parachute's just going to gently kind of land over you.
So it was 4/10 of a second. Sorry.
That's more impressive. Yeah, that's pretty good. The next challenge for NASA is that once you lose an engine with our system, you tend to roll. Because if you've got engines either side of you and you lose one here, you tend to fall and roll. So I really worry that you just get tangled up in your parachute. So our solution is you fly over water, and then you can go pretty high and pretty fast. And we've smashed into water very often, and it's not a problem. The really cool solution is wings. You deploy wings like some kind of Marvel superhero.
They just flip out.
Yeah, pretty much. And then you start generating lift from that. Then you accelerate. And then if you lose an engine, then you've got enough airflow to stay stable. Yeah. And it means that you could then go up to parachute height quite safely. But yeah.
That is so cool. And then, Ellen, you got some more questions?
Yeah. One more.
How many changes did you make to the old model of the jet suit to create the jet suit we have now?
Yeah, I sort of lost count, because it would be a case of constantly tweaking and fiddling with the old one until probably we crashed it too badly, and then we'd scrap it. I've got a load of damaged ones up in the roof of that part of my lab here. So I don't know what, we didn't build one and then try it and then throw it away and then build a brand new one. It was a case of constantly fiddling and tweaking. Now, how many times did we do that? Probably 300. Lots and lots and lots of changing and tweaking and messing with things. So yeah, I'd say it must be around probably even more than 300 times.
Now, what I find fascinating is that there is a thing called the Darwin Awards. And I'm sure you know about the Darwin Awards.
Yeah, I do know about the Darwin Awards. Thanks for bringing that up. No, I come back. I defer to my risk assessment.
No, I know you do. I know.
Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, there's lots of opportunity with this journey to be stupid and to think, wow, let's just see if I can go to 1,000 feet and 100 miles an hour. The problem is, you probably can't, and you would probably not be able to get back up again and have another go if it turns out that you couldn't. So, I'm quite proud of the fact that having built something as unusual as we have, no one's ever got hurt doing what we do, and we want to keep it like that. It doesn't mean it won't happen, because doing anything, even stepping out the front door, is dangerous.
Of course.
But we are very careful about the risks we take on.
Your suit in particular. So you have the arm fittings that you put your arms into, and then they connect to the suit. Yeah. Obviously, 3D printing has become quite an important component to the things that you do. Are you printing only in plastic, or are you also printing in metal?
No, so plastic 3D printing to hold all the electronics together, that was really valuable because stupidly in the early days, you just find little connectors would come loose, and that's a really lame reason to pack up and go away again. So that's all kind of sorted. I mean, I'm surrounded by the stuff. I mean, look, there's a plastic 3D printed battery housing that kind of hinges around your body like a waistcoat. With experimental what we call FOD covers, so the covers that go over the little engines to stop debris going in. Those clearly wouldn't stop much bigger than a sausage, but I actually use those in Johannesburg because the normal covers I used had a very fine mesh, which actually reduced the power of the engines a bit, but they really stopped anything going in the engines. Well, I had to try everything in Johannesburg because of the lack of air. And I ran those. And we printed those on my own machine. Most of the printing we do, though, we use the best machines in the world, and they're not our machines because they cost millions of dollars. So this thing I keep raving around, this is actually quite special. It hasn't got any engines in, as you can see. But this is actually 3 pieces of aluminium. So this is all printed. If you draw a line down through there, this half comes off, and the same on the other side. All the rest of this is 1 piece of aluminium.
So this is what Elon Musk is doing. He's 3D printing rocket engines and that type of thing.
Yeah, we're using the same kind of cutting edge technology. We've done titanium, aluminium, steel printing, everything. I mean, it's again, I'll point at this again. It's a good thing to use for this because your arm is all bendy and curvy and squishy. Well, that goes in that middle hole. And engines tend to be kind of hard and, you know, they've got angles and straight lines and whatever. And that's where these go. So to connect the two, 3D printing is perfect for that because it allows you to design anything that comes to your imagination and then just press print.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Let's go back to Ellen's class. I know they've got some more questions, and I'll read some others from the other class as well.
Yeah.
Do you have anything planned for the jet suit in the future?
Oh, yes. Some people stupidly ask me that when am I going to be finished? That's a really silly question. This is never stopping. It's too much fun. I mean, I literally, before I came on this on this broadcast, I was out at the farm, actually just by myself because the rest of the team are busy at the moment, and I was just testing the latest heads-up display. I mean, it's too fun, and what I really find exciting is all the stuff that we haven't yet done that I know we can do. You know, I was mentioning about wings. Can you imagine that? Me just flying around, or one of the team flying around, and then starting to accelerate, and then seeing little wings fold out, and then start to flatten the body out and accelerate to like 150 miles an hour, which is, you know, nothing for a wingsuit, you know, like Yves does. And then pulling up, vertical climb, you know, buzz the crowd, come back, wings fold back, go into the hover and land exactly on the same square foot you took off from. I think we can do that. And we're going to have great fun seeing whether we can. So
well, let me ask you this. Is it possible that in the next few years, after a few more iterations, we could see a student flying to school from home and landing in the school playground? I mean, as far-fetched as it sounds, if we could find a way to keep the fuel going or maybe to keep powering those engines.
Well, it's wings. I mean, pausing the student bit for a moment. Technically, we could do that now. I mean, somebody asked earlier how far I've flown. So at Bournemouth, I only burned 8 liters of fuel. So that's about 1/3 of my fuel in the normal suit. And I did 1.4 kilometers, which is about a mile and something. Yeah. So I can do several miles now if I want to. But it's just most events. Why would you do that? Because you've just left the event. Correct. But look, there's a couple of things. So wings will allow us to fly for like half an hour, 40 minutes, I think, which is going to be mind-boggling, yeah? But I'm gonna risk upsetting my laptop. I'm gonna slide this round here and look at all the rubbish in my lab, including fuel tanks everywhere. That thing there, no one's really seen that before. There, that's an electric version, right? So we've actually built an electric version of this suit. So there is the potential of if batteries and motors keep advancing as fast, you know, thanks to people like Elon, then potential that an electric version could indeed be not completely infeasible for people to travel to school in. I think you need like a ground pinging radar to make sure you don't go more than a few feet, because then you don't go off and, you know, go too high. But yeah, maybe, who knows? This is going to be the benefit of doing the race series, because it's going to generate the income and the fuel for, you know, developing this even further.
Well, we know already that SpaceX, I got to interview Ansari, Anusia Ansari, who was involved. The family started to sponsor this, the XPrize.
I was at XPrize last week. I flew at XPrize with Peter. Look, I'm going to have to. I'm gonna have to show you another photo just to.
We've got to see this.
It's like we planned this.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm going to show you because Peter Diamandis has even been in the suit. He had an afternoon of flight training with us, and look, this was only that. If you can see it from there, that was only. There you go. Look at that. That was there. He is. That was only last week.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you think about it, because people offered an incentive, a whole bunch of people jumped on board to enter a competition to try and advance a certain goal. If you're going to start a race, you do realize that people are going to start building jetpacks just like yours, maybe even faster to compete. And what you do is you open up this whole field.
Bring it on.
You see, now that's the right attitude to have. That is very exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'd welcome that. That'd be great. I mean, we've got to make sure we keep the rules to the point where it's kind of competitive. You know, like Yves, for instance. Yves could kind of join it, but then he has to jump out of a helicopter. He could kind of bust the race, and then he has to pull a parachute, and so that's like a different thing. But yeah, absolutely. I think even if it's just us doing this with a whole bunch of teams and broadcasting this around the world, it will accelerate the technology something crazy. Like I say, look what happened when Angelo, my other main pilot, took off in front of me at that Bournemouth air show. He clocked 74 kilometers an hour when my lane record was 51. So I mean, that we weren't even racing properly.
So how do you deal with that? Do you pull him aside and say, listen, just between the two of us, you're not really supposed to be going faster than me?
I tell you what we've got. When we're training people, we've got a remote kill switch, which shuts the entire system down when somebody's training. We never really used it in anger, but if somebody kind of panics and they needed it shut down when they're on the tether, I might just put that in his suit. So next time he's going to quick, I can just drop him in the water in a heartbeat.
On the 1st of April, I can see it happening. Right, we're going to go.
Yeah,
we'll go back to Ellen's class. I see another question.
Have you ever regretted this idea, or have you ever regretted riding the jet suit?
Oh, boy.
Say that again. Have I ever what?
Do you have any regrets? I mean, do you think this is maybe a crazy idea?
Yeah, lots of regrets when I was trying to work towards the point of getting it to work. You know, because you constantly battle two voices. One saying, this is a ludicrous idea. What are you doing? Wasting your time. It's never going to work. And the other voice saying, no, keep going. It might work and it'll be cool if it does. And I think that's the normal two voices people have in their head when they're setting up a new business or training to be, you know, an athlete or doing anything difficult, right? Doing your homework sometimes. I bet you have the same two voices, you know, right? But once we'd done it, once I knew it worked, then yeah, I know, not really. I used to sit at a desk. I used to travel a lot, but I used to sit at a desk mostly driving a spreadsheet and buying and selling ships and things. And yeah, that was quite cool as an office job went, but it's nothing as cool as this. So no, I don't have any regrets now.
I'm very curious to see when you first started this, obviously the invention part, and then there's the business aspect where you start marketing a product, but now you've become a brand. So Gravity's become a brand, an international brand, and people want a piece of you. How have you managed that aspect if you were never in the social media limelight before, and it's happened rapidly overnight?
Yeah.
What has been your strategy to deal with all of that?
Well, the brand thing, yeah. I mean, it's an important point actually. You know, and not, you know, especially with the kids watching, right? That actually life's a bit funny. If you build something really cool or do something really cool, that's great. But if you don't give it a label that people can associate it with, then actually people might not even notice you've done it. So we made a big point about building Gravity as a thing, right? Yeah, and I suppose, yeah, I mean, I must have done 300-400 interviews all over the world. There's a corner of the planet that hasn't covered us at some point. But it's not exactly a hard subject to get excited about. I mean, I'm flying a 1,000 horsepower jet suit around. It's quite easy to present. I've done, like I say, 62 live flight events and more than that in terms of TED Talk type things. We've done 4 TED Talks. It's the coolest, easiest subject to talk about. I've never ever presented to an audience that didn't find it kind of fun. So,
but
yeah,
the problem is there's only one of you. There's only one of you.
We've got a big team of people. Like Angelo now has done some, you know, my other pilot. I mean, he's an amazing guy. He is a lecturer of aeronautics and space propulsion in the UK. And he designs wingsuits in wind tunnels. And he's one of the top 10 world champion wingsuit competitors. So we work with some awesome people. He's like normal in our team, and he's not normal. And I mean, you know, I've sent him off by himself to do, or by himself, with another team member to do events now. So we are scaling our presence. But I go back to the race series thing, because that's the way of putting on an enormous audience capturing event, rather than just one or even 10 of us going around the world doing events, you know, individually.
An idea's coming to mind that perhaps maybe even a certain particular sponsor of a bovine that might be red. Do you think there could be a connection there?
Yeah, those folks. The fizzy caffeinated drink folks. No, Red Bull, right? Red Bull have done a brilliant job of building alongside a bit of a dubious drink that you shouldn't drink too much of because it'll make you go crazy. I'm in trouble now. No, they've done an awesome job alongside that drink of building a brand that represented endeavor, pushing boundaries, taking controlled risks, and achieving great things. And I love Red Bull, as in the company, and they did the launch film for us. They've done lots of media stuff with us, but they wanted to buy us out, and I said no. I want to stay as we are and do our own thing. Wow. So no, you know, I want to grow Gravity into its own thing. I don't want it to be just another act alongside a load of other things. But they've done an amazing job.
You don't have any
from a sponsorship point of view. We want to work with a whole bunch of companies that want to be the next Red Bull. Red Bull's quite a mature company now. You want the ones that are growing.
And you don't have any issues with people saying Gravity. Now, isn't that a common word? How do you trademark that as a company name?
We have.
That's incredible.
This whole world I knew nothing about, but yeah, no. In association with flying around and stuff, we don't own Gravity, but in terms of using it in aeronautics or flying around, you know, all that kind of area, then we've trademarked it. It's registered now. Crazy. We've even patented the whole flying technology as well. And just a little story on that, right? So for the kids watching, when you patent technology, you can protect it to stop somebody else going and just completely copying you. When the lawyers went through and worked out whether we could do that or not, the only example of somebody else's invention that they found that was close to what we'd done was the Ironman invention.
Oh, the actual Ironman.
The patent lawyers have framed that thing that said it's just Ironman. And then they threw it out because it's not real, right? So that's quite cool. Nobody else has been as mad as us to think this was ever going to work. So there's nothing there.
That is brilliant. Ellen, I see you have another a NASA fan, yes?
Yeah. My name's Sergey. Does your weight matter for when you're flying?
Does your weight play a role?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a bunch of variables, like little dials, if you like, that define how this flies. One of them is indeed your weight, right? It's physics, yeah? So the engines are blowing lots of air downwards. That if you think of them as like fire engine hoses blowing really lots of water downwards, you can imagine that will push you up. This is just the same. It's just air doesn't weigh very much, so you have to blow it at 1,000 miles an hour to get it to do much. So if they're blowing down with a force of about 144 kilos, or that's what, 320 pounds something, then if the weight of you and your equipment is more than that, you're not going to get off the ground. You can jump and you'll float back very slowly. That's quite cool. The other variables, though, are the air temperature. If it's a really hot day, the engines don't generate quite so much power. And also, as I was joking with Steve, when I was in Johannesburg, that's really high up in the air. It's 6,000 feet up, and you don't get so much air density, and the engines don't generate so much power then either. So each time we fly, we have to be careful. You know, how much breakfast have we had? How much fuel have we put on board? What's the weather look like? And where in the world are we doing it? And they all depend. They all influence how well you can fly.
Those are good questions. Mr. McNulty, before we give it over to you, I was going to ask one or two more that were sent in from the other class. They want to know, does your invention actually help anyone? And how did you get all the equipment to actually build it?
So helping people. We've had a bunch of search and rescue companies approach us. They like this idea that we can kind of move people around in a very precise manner. You imagine the last mile of accessing an earthquake disaster zone or something. I mean, maybe, you know, I don't know. I think we're going to need to develop it a bit more before that's a helpful thing. I would throw back, though, what's the point of a jet ski, right? Does that really help very many people? I suppose you can use it for lifeguarding a bit, but in the same kind of way, or like a Formula One car or IndyCar or NASCAR, actually, we've just built something that's quite extreme that does entertain people on a really big scale, but also could open the door to lots of other things. So the very first motor cars, I think in Germany, were laughed at, right? The people just didn't know what they were for. They were slow. They broke down every 2 minutes. They made loads of noise, and everybody just laughed at them. But look what's happened. They were the starting point of something that became world changing. And I don't know whether this will. It's just too much fun, and it's entertaining too many people for us to worry too much about that. But yeah, look, we haven't solved cancer, unfortunately.
No, but I mean, you've created cool. Personal transport, and now if you're talking electric engines, that could really have far-reaching consequences.
That thing over there works a lot better than we ever imagined. We built it not thinking it would work very well at all because of all the new, all the known problems about power and energy density and whatever. But now it works really pretty well.
Wow,
pretty crazy.
That is very.
And what was the other part of the question? Oh, well, getting the equipment. Yeah. So, like my story about the hammer drill trigger, the little trigger, very much that. The first arm assemblies, which we actually use in testing still, they're just aluminium tubes with me drilling loads of holes in them. And I think the skill of looking at a piece of junk and thinking, how can I adapt that to get just good enough that I can go and use it to test and learn something? That's been huge. And we still apply it because it's very tempting when you start earning money in a business to start thinking, well, I'm all grown up now, so I should go and spend loads of money on getting it built properly. Actually, it could take months and cost loads of money, and then it arrives in the post and you think, damn, it's not going to work. It's much better to keep adapting and modifying stuff you can lay your hands on quickly. I mean, I'd admit buying the first jet engine for quite a lot of money was quite a step, because I was starting to make it real. And then buying another and another and another, and I now own 60 of the little ones and 9 of the big ones. So that's tricky. I would recommend making those kind of commitments, money commitments, as your confidence that you're going in the right direction grows. But there's no easy, answer to that. You have to take a little bit of a gamble after a point. Sure.
And in a sense that, you obviously now you have the strategy, you're moving forward, you're creating all these new things. Do you think that we might see some interesting new products on the market before the end of next year?
Well, I don't know. The one of the problems with this area that we're in is that if you do go mainstream, if you do claim you're going to be handing out, technology to members of the public, then it can easily get dangerous if you're not careful. So even drones, even the very first drones, caused a big problem. I mean, they too many people had them. 1 or 2 people caused a problem, stuck them in the way of airplanes landing and stuff. And then all these rules came in and kind of spoilt it for everybody else. So there is, and this is dangerous equipment. This is a bit like a motorbike. If you're an idiot with a motorbike, you can really hurt yourself very easily. If you're an idiot with this, the same thing, probably even more dramatically. If you're not an idiot and you know what you're doing, it's much safer than a motorbike. But the more people that have this, the more risk there is that somebody makes a mistake. And that's another benefit of doing a race series. We can have people in a controlled environment who are trained to entertain people in a spectacular way. And meanwhile, us learn about how to make it continuously safer as well, even when you're not over water.
Now, did you ever consider yourself to be a maker? Because obviously right now in schools around the world and the trends in various countries is to move towards the maker movement, where you're physically building and designing and creating things. I mean, this is exactly up your alley. Were you always a maker? Were you always a tinkerer with tools and stuff at home?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I grew up around my father's kind of workshop when I was a kid, and I used to just really enjoy, bolting things together and messing around. I remember there's a project I just took on myself of taking an old radio controlled car and an old boat. It was a model boat that wasn't supposed to ever go in water, but it had a propeller. And I thought, well, if I can sort of strap the old gearbox of the broken electric car over the top of the one gear that there was on the shaft of the propeller, then I might possibly be able to make it work. And I used the steering servo, the little front wheel steering servos, to steer the rudder. And it did work. It was the most noisy, horrible, inefficient lump ever. But it did work, and I remember finding that really rewarding, that I'd managed to turn a broken car and a boat into a working radio-controlled boat. So, yeah, I used to love that kind of stuff. And, I think the resources you've got access to now to look up on YouTube how stuff works, it's just amazing. So, I was very much like that as a kid.
What about your kids? Do they see you and think, that's what I want to do? Are they makers as well? Do you build with them?
I'm just going to see, because my 2 kids are around at the moment. I was going to try and grab one of them if I could and get them to bring in. We've got a We've got an Ultimaker. I expect some schools have got the Ultimaker. I mean, there's lots of 3D printers out there now, but we've got one. We use it for prototyping, and I did do these things, those FOD covers on it. My 9-year-old at the moment is printing little robots for his school, and I'll see if I can grab him in a minute. He's building these wonderful little robots that when you print them, they're all solid, and then all you have to do is sort of crack their joints, and then suddenly they're all moving, and because the joints are all
they fuse a little bit. They fuse a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And he's having great fun doing that. We're doing all sorts of different colors and whatever. So yeah, they're quite involved with some of the stuff we play with. They're a bit too young to go flying yet, but they really want to. And I've flown at their schools as well, which is quite fun.
Is there an age limit?
I don't know. I mean, we made the rule. We can make the rules.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, can you imagine?
I would say it's more probably a strength thing that holding, again, I'll wave this thing around again. When this has got engines in it, that thing weighs about 5.5 kilos. So what's that, 12 pounds? And if you can hold that out to one side with a straight arm for 5-10 seconds, that helps when you're learning. I don't fly like that, but when you're learning, you really need to have a little bit of strength. So I'd say it's more about, how strong and capable you are, I'd say, rather than an age thing. And yet the electric version will be even easier. That weighs less and it's a lot easier to handle.
That is so cool. Mr. McNulty, have you got any students that would like to ask questions?
Yes, we do. This is a new
great. Group. Fire away. You're back again with a new group.
Come on over. Go ahead and be nice and loud.
Hi, I'm Lily. How did you come up with this idea? Did anyone inspire you?
Yeah, I mean, it was more the idea of the challenge, really. And I suppose I've always been interested in flight and in, I suppose cars and horsepower and all that kind of stuff. And I thought wouldn't it be cool if you could take the body and the mind and add some power to it, and not rely on an aeroplane or a helicopter structure, but use your arms and your body and your brain balance. And I just started to hatch this idea. I genuinely didn't occur to me that is quite like Ironman. Obviously, as we went through the stages, it started to look more and more like, hang on a minute, I've seen this in a film somewhere. But no, it was more just the almost kid-like dream of, I wonder if I could fly by putting forms of power and propulsion on me and control it that way, because it just seemed like, well, no one's really done that very much before. So it was just honestly, it's hard to describe. It was just the joy of a crazy idea.
And crazy ideas, what it's all about. I mean, the world, when two guys said that we could build this thing that we could fly, and we're going to call it an airplane. I mean, everyone probably thought, absolutely crazy. Yeah. And look where we are today.
Every major breakthrough in science or technology started out with something that, before it worked, looked absolutely ludicrous.
Okay, we have another question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My name is Alex. So my question is, can you customize it? And if so, how much more would it cost?
Ooh. Yeah, no, so every one we build is pretty much different and evolves. When we do the race series, because we 3D print nearly the whole thing. In fact, I'm going to try and point again. That funny white thing above my finger there, that is one piece of printed plastic, which is the bonnet, if you like, the hood, I suppose, over the back of one of the new suits we built. So we can 3D print anything you can imagine and embed LEDs in it and the whole lot. So when these athletes are flying these suits, they're all going to look like something out of Mad Max. So yeah, you can customize, certainly the look you can customize as much as you like. We've worked very hard to kind of refine how technically the system works. So all the little subtle angles, I'm going away this again. You can see that the arm here and the engines, it's all symmetrical around this point here. We've actually shifted this now. I mean, this is all very clever because it's all printed, but I can't adjust it, which is annoying. We've now moved it so the arm is actually over here. You can maybe not see.
If you have a look, if you click over here, I've noticed that you're looking
at that one's a symmetrical one.
In these photos.
That's a cool photo. That's where I was hovering with a Harrier in behind me at the Farnborough Air Show in the UK. No, that one's symmetrical. That was before we changed it. We changed all this stuff so quickly. We worked out, we shifted one of the engines slightly back. It would actually lift the weight of the engines whilst you're flying. And so it suddenly became way easier. We've made loads of little changes like that. So I wouldn't say we would customize the core layout too much unless it's there for practical, functional reason. But in terms of the look, yeah, you can go crazy. You could make yourself look like a flying hot dog if you wanted to. Yeah, which we don't want to do. Yeah, so loads of potential.
That is very cool. Great question. Great question.
Oh, thanks.
Any more? Oh, I see a hand up at the back.
I got a third one over here, and then 4. Yeah, we got 2 more. We got 2 more. That's all right. How are we doing with time?
We've now hit. We've got about. Richard, can we squeeze another 5 minutes out of you?
No, I'm fine. Yeah. No, I'm. Yeah.
Okay.
No, go for it.
Another 5 minutes. Let's go. Let's go.
Thanks. Okay, go ahead and introduce yourself.
So, hi, I'm Logan, and I was curious, what do you think these gravity-defying suits could potentially be used for in the future? Like, what purposes could they be used for?
Yeah, I mean, the easy thing at the moment is entertainment. The fact this has had such a big impact on people. If you like watching this online, believe me, when you see this live, and I can say this because I've been usually the person behind the mask. It has a really big impact on people. I mean, it's louder than a 747, and there's a human hovering right in front of you, like stationary. So why not go and scale that? So it's entertainment, first of all, but that's the way that we drive and enhance the technology to where it can become something that can be a mainstream form of transport, potentially. We do stuff with the military. We do stuff, as I mentioned, with search and rescue. I'm not actually worrying too much about exactly where it leads. A, because it's too much fun in the meantime, and B, because actually from an entertainment point of view, we know that's a really good business in its own right. We get now probably 3 requests a day to do events all over the world. And as I said, we've done 62 in 20 countries. So entertainment mostly at the moment.
So how do you handle the traveling? I mean, I just know that, I was in the States in July, and those transatlantic flights are a nightmare. How do you deal with all the flying?
I'm gonna try and find yet another photo to share with you because I just checked this suit in 2 suitcases. I'm gonna show you a cool picture if I can find it.
And you haven't been stopped where they go, excuse me, what have you got inside the suitcase? And they look and they go, rocket thrusters. Is there something we should know about?
No, right. I've even had some jet engines in my hand luggage before, and no one. I mean, they scan them and they ask me, "What the heck are these?" And I say they're jet engines, and they look through their little book of things you're not allowed to carry, and no one's thought of putting jet engines in the book. But there's nothing you can really do to anybody with a jet engine. I mean, you can hit them on the head, I suppose, but I can't find that. There's a cool picture of me out by a private jet with 2 suitcases. Basically, all the equipment fits into 2 suitcases, and I've got approvals from British Airways, and every airline I've ever flown with has not had a problem. We did get stopped once in New York because I'd been running jet fuel instead of diesel, and jet fuel smells quite strong. And I didn't do a good job of really getting everything out of the lines. And our friends at TSA, the security folks, had a bad day, obviously, and I had to UPS the equipment after behind me. That's happened once, and once in Switzerland for the same reason ages ago. But that was it. Yeah, other than that, like I say, I must have done 140 international flights with this, and yeah, it's not a problem. I only came back from Athens 24 hours ago.
Funny you should say that. We have a class in Greece at the moment.
Oh, really? Yeah, that was cool. I was flying there. It's very cold. The weather's got really cold in Athens, surprisingly. I'm still looking. I'm not being rude here. I'm trying to find the cool picture of me standing outside a private jet. Here we go. Right, here we go.
Let's have a look.
Right, so apart from the fact I don't usually travel by private jet, this is a pretty cool event, though. There's me with the guy who owns the jet. But the most important thing is those 2 suitcases, which look massive there, but they're not. They're normal suitcases. They've got a 1,000 horsepower jet suit in. So yeah, we just turn up with those suitcases, and 20 minutes later, I can fly in front of you. If you give me the fuel, I can't travel with the fuel. But yeah, crazy, huh?
That is very cool. So now I see we have another question there with Mr. McNulty.
Yeah, it's our last one.
Okay.
Hi. How has your life changed after you made this, like, majorly? Like how?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I spent 16 years like working in the City of London, doing a city kind of job. As I say, it was quite an interesting job, but it was really at the end of the day working behind a desk. And now I spend my whole life flying around to different countries, doing huge events and standing on stage and whatever. Yeah, it's a bit weird. It's kind of cool though, and I think your generation is going to grow up doing lots of different jobs as you grow up, and you'll switch from one minute being, you know, working at a desk, and the next minute being a TV presenter or whatever. I've sort of accidentally gone and done that. It's cool. It's the opposite of boring. I guess it would be embarrassing if it turned out I couldn't, you know, I got massive stage fright standing on a stage talking or something like that. That would be annoying, wouldn't it? But no, I fitted into it pretty well. I mean, I'd say it is pretty exhausting. As I say, in the last 8 days, I've been to LA, Johannesburg, and Athens, and London in between all of those. So yeah, it does get quite tiring, but I can't really complain. I run a jet suit business, for goodness sake.
I mean, you put that on your resume.
Cool.
That's pretty cool.
It is one of those dreams that you have. There's lots of adults sit at their desk probably for 30, 35 years and have a dream of, I don't know, running a puppy farm, or that's a weird one, or going and, you know, working in running a restaurant, or retiring to run a pub or something like that, right? And it's very hard as an adult to engineer your life to go and achieve that, yeah? And I've just been very lucky, and thanks to my wife and my kids as well, that I've managed to not only build this thing, but also engineer that our life has suddenly shifted in that direction, and we've managed it. So it is tricky, but yeah, it's worked out pretty well so far. That's
very cool. Do you guys, Kiki, do you guys have a question there in Greece that you want to ask?
Guys, give a wave.
We've got about 1 more minute. So, and if you have a question for him,
I'll find the Greek. It's not going to reveal much. I'll pull up the picture from Athens. It was at a kind of holiday resort. There was a big meeting. There we go. I flew over their pool.
Oh, you flew over the pool. Let's have a look. Let's have a look.
There you go. There's the swimming pool. There's a load of wet spectators in the background. That was quite fun. And then in between, in fact, only 2 hours before, I ran up the mountain round the back of the hotel, and there you go. There was. I actually ran a little bit too far. There was a cross up the top there. I ran a little bit too far and ended up cutting my legs up quite bad trying to run down the side of the mountain. But that's yeah. Oh, and I saw some massive tortoises as well while I was there. Look, I never knew you had tortoises that big in the mountains around Athens. You can't really see them there. That was pretty cool. My kids got a tortoise much smaller than that. Anyway, there you go.
I must just say that, I mean, that Greece is obviously wonderful, and LA and all those other places, but you haven't been to Cape Town.
No, well, the closest I got was Johannesburg, and I prefer Cape Town.
That doesn't count.
No, okay.
We're talking about the opposite of South Africa. I think we need to get you to Cape Town at some point, and when you do, then it'll be really awesome, because then we can take you on 1 or 2 school visits and get the kids to interact and check out all your gear.
Well, you might be there. There was a guy in Johannesburg who is very serious about buying one of our suits. You know, again, the last one we sold is this one here, and he really wants to buy one of those. So he's going to come over, I think, in the spring, early spring, to do some flight training with us. And then if that goes well, I think he wants to buy a suit, so we would be back out there potentially. So.
Okay, so if you are coming, just make sure you come via Cape Town.
Yeah.
I'll sort you guys out when you get here. So, I mean, we've got about no time left over, and unfortunately, we've run out of time. But we've got still a few viewers from around the world who are still watching the live stream. What advice would you give to young people that are sitting there thinking, I've got a crazy idea, shouldn't I try it? What sort of advice would you give them?
The first advice I give them is make sure they plug their laptop in correctly. Hang on, it's about to go die. Wait a second. There we go. Yeah, we're saved.
Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Best advice ever.
Right, so advice, sorry, that distracted me slightly. Advice, go on, sorry, advice for young people or what? Sorry, hit me again.
What is the best advice you would give young people, you know, who are worried about the fact that their idea might not be a brilliant idea, or maybe that it might not work? You know, we all have insecurities about our ideas.
Yeah, no, right. So you know, most people believe you only live life once, so you should make the best of it you can. So don't sit on some idea and risk never going and progressing it. But at the same time, you've got to balance that with what I said right at the beginning, which is that, yes, go and explore and learn from experimenting and be willing to fail all the time, and don't be put off. But just make sure every time you fail, you can get back up again. And like I say, and there's 3 things. It's safety-wise, money-wise, and reputation, which might not mean much to kids necessarily, but I mean if you upset people around you, your parents, your teachers, the town you live in, you get, criminal record from trying something you shouldn't have done. That's a bad idea because you can't do it again, right? So as long as you make this experimentation and exploration sustainable, yeah, you can keep going. Then get on and explore, and you'll probably end up finding it wasn't the original idea you had, but it was the learning from exploring that idea that opens a door you never even thought about. I've certainly really noticed that. Yeah, and then just get out there and explore, and do it, like I say, do it safely, and keep trying. It might be your 100th idea or 100th iteration that makes that breakthrough. It won't be your first or second idea unless you're very lucky.
So just to end off, I was very fortunate enough to go to the Yves Rossy Museum in DC.
Oh.
Have you been there at all?
So, I've forgotten his name. The guy, Mr. Yves Rossy, I've forgotten his first name. His daughter is a good friend of mine who reached out, loved what we did, and she helped us arrange the event where we trained Peter Diamandis to fly. And he said, can we put something in his Smithsonian wing? So it's a small world. I forgot his first name. Though,
it's one of the most incredible museums. I mean, I was very lucky to go and, to house so many aircraft in one building. The Americans know how to do a museum. I mean, that's just
So they want us in there. It's pretty cool.
And inside they've also got the who was it now?
Wright brothers.
Felix Baumgarten. They've got his, and they've got Alan Eustace's equipment as well. I don't know if you know about Alan Eustace.
Yeah, the name. I know the name. I can't picture what he did though, but he did something pretty cool. He did
exactly what Felix did, but he broke all Felix's records, and he wasn't funded by a certain beverage that was red. Right. He actually self-funded because he's a Google executive, and he broke all the land speed, the speed records for falling. He did everything all on his own.
That's pretty cool. Yeah,
and all his equipment was actually there as well. So it's and I'd love to see, the gravity, maybe the first 2 or 3 iterations of the equipment there housed at that museum.
Yeah. Well, we should be. I mean, we were asked to, invited to do that at some point. And there's another very famous US museum. I probably shouldn't reveal that we've already done a deal with them where one of the early suits is going to appear in that museum, and we're going to fly there early next year as well. So
I might even know it because I might know the director personally.
You have to email me.
We'll chat offline.
I can't remember the name of the museum, but I'm not supposed to say it anyway. So isn't that
okay. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to say thank you so much for joining us. If you could just make one big smile for the camera so we can take a screenshot of you smiling. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, excellent. Because what happens is
down the corner.
Sometimes YouTube, they freeze, they choose their own photograph, which they think would be the right one for the video. And it's always the one where you were like this.
Yeah, it would be.
I like to be able to choose my own photo. And thank you, Kiki, for joining us all the way from Greece, and all our viewers who've been watching it live, and the schools in America who know who you are, whose name I cannot mention. Thank you for joining us and allowing us to read out some of your students' questions. And I'm going to stop the broadcast over here.